In this tutorial, you're going to learn how to use insert effects and channel send effects to add effects processing to your mix. Once you've created your Cubase project and you've started to mix all the tracks together, you may well want to add some effects processing to individual tracks and to the mix as a whole. There are two ways of using effects plugins within Cubase. You can either use an insert effect or an effects channel track. Let's start by looking at the bass track within this Cubase project. Let's open the audio channel settings window, and on the left hand side of the screen we can see the insert rack. This is where we can insert a plugin into just that track. Let's click in slot number 1 and let's start by inserting a compressor. Cubase will open the VST compressor plugin window and we can choose one of the presets from the Soundframe window. You can also make your own changes to the various controls within the compressor plugin in this window. For example, I'm changing the threshold down and up. Once I've done that, I can close the plugin. Let's now choose a second insert. Let's choose the Studio EQ. We'll turn on one of the bands and add a boost. We now have a compressor and Studio EQ as insert effects just on the bass track. Let's now choose the sax solo, open the audio channel settings window, and this time let's choose the Studio EQ again as insert effect 1, and let's this time add a little bit more of the top end EQ by raising EQ 3 and 4. We can now choose to add a second insert effect, perhaps a delay, and use the stereo delay. And we can just use the default settings for that to add it to the saxophone. Let's now have a listen to the saxophone part with those plugins. You can hear the delay kicking in and the EQ. If I turn the delay off by clicking on the power button and on again, you can hear the difference, on and off. So those are insert effects added to specific tracks. Remember that when you create an insert effect, you're essentially adding an additional piece of software to Cubase. So if you're using a lot of insert effects on lots of different tracks, you're actually going to place a huge strain on the processor within your computer. So use these carefully. The other way of working is to use an effects processor within an effects channel track. This allows you to send an amount of signal from each individual channel to that effects channel track. The way we do that is to create an effects channel track. So add track and choose effects channel track. We then choose which sort of plugin to use, in this case a Reverb and Rimworks, and we can set the configuration to stereo and click OK. We can now choose a Rimworks preset using the Soundframe window, and we can choose whichever setting we like the best. In this case, I'm going to use Drums, Drum Shine. If you now look at the Cubase project window, you can see a new type of track at the bottom of the track list called an effects channel. If we now open the Cubase mixer by pressing F3 and we scroll to the right hand end of the channels, we can now see the Effects 1 Rimworks effects channel track. This is a pinky purple colour to distinguish it from other types of channels. This controls the amount of reverb that's being fed back into the stereo mix. So how do we send signal from each individual channel to the effects channel track? Let's open the drum track and look at the audio channel settings. In the right hand side of the screen we can see the sends column and we'll click in slot number 1. We can now choose the Effects 1 Rimworks bus and we can turn it on, and we can now use the send level slider to increase the signal. The larger the line, the more signal that's being sent to the Rimworks bus. If we now choose the Edit Channel button, we can choose the next channel, which is the ride, choose the bus, turn it on, and increase the amount of signal with the slider. And once again with the drum loops, choose the bus, turn it on, and increase the amount of signal. So now we have 3 tracks, the snare, the ride, and the drum loops, all sending some of their signal to the effects channel track. We open the mixer again, extend the view, and choose to view the sends bus 1 to 8. If we now scroll along and find the 3 drum channels, we'll see that the Effects 1 bus is turned on, and that the fader levels are turned up, sending signal to the Effects One RoomWorks plugin. If we now click playback, and if we scroll along to see the effects channel track, and I mute it, you can hear that the drums either have reverb or don't have reverb, depending on whether the mute button's on. If I want more reverb in the mix, I can simply turn up the Effects One RoomWorks channel fader. So this is how you would go about setting up an effects channel track and then sending signal from each individual channel to create a reverberant mix. This is a far more efficient use of your CPU processing power, as there's only one plugin running. Using plugins is an essential part of the mixing process in Cubase. However, you need to make sure that you use them appropriately to ensure there is no unnecessary strain on your CPU.